What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Powerhouse Mentality podcast. I am your host. I am Caitlin Kenna Smith. Now, what if the very foods you've been told to avoid are actually good for you? And today we're exposing 4 of the biggest lies about food that are ruining your health. 4 of the biggest lies that the government has told us about your food that has been harmful for our health. And really, this comes down to a lot of different things. Now, the lies about nutrition, they didn't happen by accident. They're the result of decades of flawed science, corporate lobbying, and misguided government policies that prioritize profits over public health. They want you sick. They want you dumb. They want you easy to manipulate. And that starts with what we eat. That starts with nutrition, because nutrition is what dictates our health. And our health dictates everything. It's the foundation of who we are. And these policies have steered us over time towards a more ultra-processed food diet that's making us sicker, that's making us fatter, that's making us more unhealthy than ever before. You have to understand that right now, 80% of the average American's diet is processed food. 80%. So the other 20%, they're eating whole nutrient-dense foods. It should be fucking flipped. And that's the problem. But where did this all start? So in the mid-20th century, the government introduced dietary guidelines. And these dietary guidelines didn't focus on what you think they should. They didn't focus on whole nutrient-dense foods. They pushed cheap grains, vegetable oils, and ultra-processed foods. But why? Right? Because we know that if something has less ingredients, if something comes from the earth, if something comes from an animal, it's probably more advantageous for our health and performance. But because industries like big food, big pharma heavily influence these guidelines, shaping public perception to favor their products. So a lot of the studies that you see that are done that maybe promote not eating red meat, not eating dairy products and things of that nature, a lot of them are funded by Pepsi, Coke, all of these big food markets, because whoever has the dollars controls the narrative. Whoever has the dollars controls the narrative. So the demonization of red meat and saturated fats wasn't about health. It was about selling more processed alternatives, which are cheaper to produce. You're able to patent them, so they're better for the pockets of the people who are promoting them, and they yielded higher profits. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. They don't care about your health, they care about their pockets. Things are starting to shift a little bit in the right direction, but I feel like a lot of people are just stuck in the old ways where, like, we grew up in the 80s or we grew up in the 90s or we grew up in the early 2000s for some of you. And we were pushed like low fat, don't eat this, don't eat that, eat more of this. And a lot of us just started eating 100 calorie packs or like low fat, low sugar, low cholesterol foods that were ultra processed and had little to no value for our health. So ultra-processed foods, which now make up a staggering percentage of the modern diet, like I said, up to 80%, are engineered to be addictive. These companies pay millions of dollars to be able to manufacture these foods to become more addictive. Examples of this, Oreos, Doritos. There's nothing wrong with these foods, but the problem is that they are very, very difficult for you to stop consuming them because of how they've been altered. They're loaded with refined sugars, artificial additives, and unhealthy fats, and they're stripped of the nutrients that our bodies need to actually thrive. So a lot of people in America are over-consuming calories, but they're starving their body of nutrients because they're over-consuming all of the wrong foods. And these foods are just so easy to over-consume. If I were to tell you, hey, go ahead and eat 500 calories in broccoli, you probably would struggle to do so. But if I told you to do the same thing in Oreos, it'd probably be very easy, and it actually would be very difficult to eat just 500 calories of Oreos, because 2 Oreos have like 150 calories. So that's a scam all in itself. But one example that I really like to use in this situation is If I were to tell you to eat a bag of Lay's potato chips, you'd be like, yeah, bet, I got that, no problem. However, if I were to tell you to eat 3 baked potatoes, you would struggle. And I bet that most of you wouldn't be able to finish that because white potatoes are the most filling food you can eat. But once you start to process them, you add fats, you add sugars, you add salts, they become irresistible and you can't stop. And that's the problem. And these foods hijack our hunger signals. They spike blood sugar, which there's nothing inherently wrong with spiking blood sugar. You will spike blood sugar throughout the day. The problem is that if you're doing it too consistently, it can lead to people just not being able to regulate their blood sugar properly, and it can create insulin problems. All right. But they also fuel chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, heart disease. And the government's guidelines not only allowed this, but actively promoted it by pushing products like margarine, like low-fat snacks, and sugary cereals as healthier options. The result is a nation plagued by health crises, and the very systems that were supposed to protect us and educate us have led us to an epidemic of preventable diseases, all while billion-dollar corporations profit off of our declining health. Now it's time for you guys to learn a little bit more and to reject the lies and question the systems that put profits over people and reclaim your health by focusing on real whole foods. And I want to break down the truth and I want to set the record straight, because if you go on social media and you scroll through, you're going to find different reels and different messages promoting all different things. If you Google something, you will find the answer that you're looking for. You will find the answer that red meat is good. You will find the answer that red meat is bad. You will find the answer that oatmeal is killing you. You will find the answer that oatmeal is great for your heart health. So what is the truth? And that's the craziest thing. And the first thing that I want to really emphasize to you guys is that you need to be aware of what works best for you, what feels good to you, and what feels good for your body. Most of us just don't have enough self-awareness, and we've been told what to do by a diet industry. And that's just not the way to live. You need to be able to understand, like, hey, this feels good for me. This amount of food feels good for me. This amount of protein feels good for me. You need to be able to understand what feels good to you, but also not be blinded by what is comfortable for you. There's a difference between what feels good and what's comfortable. Because remember, growth is found when you get outside the comfort zone. So if you feel like you're comfortable eating 50 grams of protein a day, but you have a goal to lose body fat and gain muscle, you need to get uncomfortable to get enough protein that your body needs to build tissue. Now, let's kick off these lies. And these are all lies that I once believed back when I first got into my fitness journey and when I started being a fitness trainer and when I just started my own journey over 10 years ago. It's been about 12, 13 years since I've started my journey. And all of these lies I believed to detriment, to the point where I then restricted calories so much, restricted the choices of food that I was eating so much that I developed an eating disorder that led to me being 89 pounds at 5'6" and almost dying. So the reason why I want to promote this to you guys today is to save you from going down the rabbit hole that so many people have gone down. That's my mission. So lie number 1 is red meat is bad for you. Now, what we've been told is red meat is linked to heart disease, linked to cancer, and linked to other health issues. And it's a lie because there's a difference between what they promote in research, and that's the most important thing here that I want you guys to understand, is that most people who promote like red meat is bad for you, and they throw a study at you, they don't even know how to fucking read the study and break it down. Because a lot of the times, these studies don't differentiate processed meat and high-quality grass-fed meat. They'll say those who ate a diet high in red meat or high in meat were more likely to develop cancer, were more likely to develop heart issues. When in all reality, they didn't mention that the meat was hot dogs, cold cuts, and things that aren't necessarily not processed. So there's a difference between high quality meat that's grass-fed, even grain-fed, that is just meat. It has one ingredient, fucking meat, versus something like a hot dog or something like a Beyond Burger that has so many ingredients that are chemically made. Now, the big thing about red meat that I want to highlight here, and I want to tell it from a personal story, is that over 10 years ago, when I first developed my eating disorder, I went to a doctor because during the time I was also developing autoimmune conditions, or I was having autoimmune-like symptoms, which inevitably led to me being diagnosed with IgA deficiency, meaning I just don't make the IgA hemoglobin in my blood. But when I was starting to have symptoms from these things, I went to doctor after doctor after doctor. And I remember one doctor specifically told me, just cut out red meat. Don't eat red meat. That'll probably help. It didn't help. In fact, my health declined even more. But because I was also in a state of disordered eating, my head said, oh, I can't have red meat because it's bad for me. So I didn't, because anytime anybody ever told me something could potentially be bad for me or could lead to poor health or could lead to weight gain, I would immediately cut it out because I do not want to deal with that. I want to be as small as possible. And my health honestly didn't matter at that point. Red meat contains essential nutrients like iron, like zinc, like B vitamins. In fact, if you had to, you could eat only red meat and survive. You could not do that with any other food. If I were to say, hey, only eat potatoes, you would die because protein and fats are essential for your health. If I were to told you to only eat chicken, yes, chicken does have protein. It does have some fats depending on the part of the bird. However, it doesn't contain these essential nutrients like iron, like zinc, and like B vitamins that cause us not just to survive, but to thrive. That's why the carnivore diet inherently works. However, it's extremely restrictive, and it isn't an option that most people can actually adhere to because the reality is most people can't stick with a caloric deficit, let alone, hey, cut out like every food and only eat meat. Most people can't do that long term. Now, this lie can cause so much harm because people miss out on nutrient-dense foods and they rely on inferior protein sources. So what you've seen recently over the last 10 years is that, you see the introduction of things like the Beyond Burgers that are replacing beef burgers. Like I said, if you look at the back of a beef burger, if you look at the ingredients on beef, it's just beef. If you look at the ingredients on the back of a Beyond Burger, there's a whole lot of shit that you probably can't even pronounce. There's a difference because that is an inferior protein source. There's so many studies at this point that have proven that plant protein sources are inferior to animal protein sources because, one, you are an animal, you are not a plant. Now, let's set the record straight. So I want you to understand that some studies, like I mentioned before, linking red meat to health issues often lump processed meats and high-quality red meat together. And a lot of the times, it comes from the group was in a calorie surplus, and that was the problem that was causing the heart issues, was causing the cancer issues. It was the fact that they were in a caloric deficit, in a caloric surplus, causing inflammation. These are things that you need to understand when you're looking at studies. You have to understand that correlation doesn't always equal causation. Lifestyle factors also are often ignored in this study. So if somebody doesn't exercise or somebody barely moves because they're sitting at a desk all day, or if they have an extremely stressful lifestyle, they don't sleep much, that's also going to impact their health. So what I want you to do, if you've been somebody who's been afraid of red meat, I want you to opt for high quality grass-fed and minimally processed red meat. Get a good steak. My favorite steak, I've been really loving like some top sirloin, some filet mignon, a New York strip. But I started adding in red meat again about 6 months ago. And it's been unbelievable for my mental clarity, for the energy that I feel throughout the day, for my recovery, and for my strength and performance. Red meat has much more creatine than any other meat, which creatine helps with overall energy production. It helps with strength. It helps with performance. It helps with cognitive health. So try it once. The way that I started it, because again, I was terrified. I didn't know how my body would respond to it. I started literally with being like, hey, I usually have chicken for dinner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half an ounce of steak with my chicken. And then it went to, now I'm going to have an ounce. Now I'm going to 1.5 ounces. So I slowly stair-stepped it up, and now I'm never going back. Like, I fucking love red meat, and I'm on a mission currently to make the best steak I possibly can make. So whenever it comes down to these things, if you're always worried about what you're eating, If you're worried about these lies that you've been told, focus on the highest quality you can get. And remember, if something has one ingredient, if something comes from the earth, it's not bad for you. Unless it's literally poison, then don't eat it. So lie number 2, eggs and dairy are unhealthy. And this one is actually starting to, you're really seeing it go in the opposite direction, which is awesome. Like, you're starting to see like eggs are the incredible egg, and egg is literally nature's multivitamin. And I mean the whole fucking egg. I don't just mean the egg whites. Because back in my day, back when I first started in fitness, it was, hey, throw out the yolk. It's got too much cholesterol. It's got too much fat. Just stick with the white because the white is all protein. Now, the protein is great, right? And the white is the protein part of the egg. So if you just have egg whites, it's literally straight protein, and it could be a really good hack if you're somebody who is struggling to hit their protein goal without going over their calories. It could be, hey, for breakfast, instead of having 4 eggs, why don't I have 2 eggs and a cup of egg whites? It's a really great combo. But I don't want people to think that the yolk is bad, because the yolk is where all of the incredible nutrients, the choline, the cholesterol, all of the great things that an egg has to offer other than protein lie. Remember, there's nothing wrong with fats. Fats do not make you fat. Adipose tissue, which is body fat, and the macronutrient fat that you see in foods are not the same thing. So we've been told that eggs raise cholesterol and dairy is inflammatory or fattening. Now, eggs are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, containing essential fats like choline and cholesterol. And full-fat dairy provides critical nutrients like calcium, vitamin D, and healthy fats. And here's the thing. Again, back in my day when I was younger, my mom always bought skim milk. Bless my mom, because she thought she was doing something good. But the problem is that if you're having low-fat or fat-free milk, yes, the calories are less. However, they're adding in more sugars. And because the vitamins that you're looking to get from the full-fat dairy, like the vitamin D and the calcium, those things are fat-soluble vitamins and minerals. So they need the fat to be able to be absorbed. So if you're eating milk or you're drinking milk that's fat-free and it says enhanced with vitamin D, you're not absorbing any of the vitamin D because you're not having a fat source with that vitamin. So if something is a fat-soluble vitamin, it needs a fat combined with it to help absorption. So a lot of people actually experienced nutrient deficiencies back when fat-free and skim milk were introduced, because instead of being able to get their vitamin D and calcium, they weren't properly absorbing it. Now, this can cause a lot of harm to people because people avoid nutrients in these whole foods. And again, they turn to processed alternatives that if I'm taking fat out of something, I have to add something into it to make it taste good. And usually that's sugar, which again, nothing wrong with sugar. But if you're over consuming ultra processed foods, it can lead to problems, especially if they're just adding ingredients that you don't recognize. So I want you guys to understand that dietary cholesterol has minimal impact on blood cholesterol for most people. Eggs are a nutrient powerhouse. They're rich in choline, which is essential for your brain health. They're rich in cholesterol, which is essential for cognitive health and has even been shown to help with strength and performance. And when it comes to dairy, full-fat dairy supports your hormone health because it has those fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K2. And the biggest issue that a lot of people have with that is, oh, well, I'm lactose intolerant. Well, many people can actually tolerate fermented or cultured dairy products like yogurt and kefir, and even raw milk. So make sure that if you have been deemed lactose intolerant, sometimes we can do that to ourselves by avoiding dairy for so long that our bodies no longer produce the enzyme to break it down. So slowly adding it back in could help. However, if you are one of those people, try a yogurt. And if you really, truly can't do these things, then make sure you're supplementing with vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K2, and calcium to make sure you're keeping your bones strong, because dairy isn't inflammatory. It's just the type of dairy that you're consuming could be what's inflammatory. So things that have been shown to help with eggs and dairy is better muscle recovery, stronger bones, and overall better nutrient density. So choose pasture-raised eggs for better nutrient content. You can tell the difference between, just a generic egg that you get from the store and a pasture-raised egg. Literally, the yolk is like bright orange neon in the pasture-raised eggs versus the generic egg that you get that it's like barely yellow. There's a reason why. And then opt for full-fat dairy, or if you can't handle the spicy dairy like myself, get some fermented options and avoid highly processed or flavored varieties, because those are just going to add additional sugars that you just don't need. Number 3, and this kind of goes right off of number 2, is we've been told cholesterol is the enemy. Now, high cholesterol causes heart disease, so you should avoid foods like eggs and butter. How many people listening to this have heard that before? Because I know that I have. My entire life I was taught that. But there's a difference between dietary cholesterol and blood cholesterol. And blood cholesterol, or I'm sorry, the cholesterol that we eat, the dietary cholesterol, plays an incredible role in hormone production and cell function. So people are afraid of healthy fats and they turn to low fat, high sugar foods instead. How many times have you seen a fucking candy, like a fruit snack or something, that says a low cholesterol food? Well, great. It's low cholesterol, but it's also high in sugar and doesn't have any nutrients in it. So dietary cholesterol from foods like eggs, butter, shellfish, they don't have a significant effect on blood cholesterol for most people. And cholesterol is essential for producing hormones, testosterone, estrogen, which are hormones of vitality, hormones of strength, hormones of longevity and performance. They're not just a sex hormone. But also cholesterol plays a huge role in maintaining cell membrane integrity, so keeping our cells strong and vital. And the last thing about cholesterol is that a lot of cholesterol-rich foods like eggs, like avocados, like fatty fish, like grass-fed beef are vital for brain health and energy. So focus on eating whole foods that are naturally cholesterol-rich, like eggs, like avocados, like fatty fish, like grass-fed meat. And focus on reducing inflammation through an anti-inflammatory diet, which is lower in sugar, processed sugars, and high in omega-3s. And you can find omega-3s in eggs. You can find omega-3s in fatty fish like salmon. You can supplement with a high-quality omega-3 product. I do, because I don't eat enough fish, so I make sure that I get in omega-3s every single day, 2.5 grams through the supplement that I use, which is Full Mega by First Form. Always linked down below with all the First Form supplements that I use. But don't be afraid of eggs. Don't be afraid of cholesterol. Don't be afraid of dairy. Don't be afraid of butter. Those are all incredible foods. And the final lie, and this one I feel like a lot of people have caught on to over the last year, especially with the introduction of products like electrolytes, like LMNT, is salt should be avoided. So salt causes high blood pressure and should be drastically limited, is what we've been taught. But the lie is that our body needs sodium. Sodium is vital for hydration, for muscular function, for overall health, for nervous system function. And there's a huge harm that comes with this one. People can suffer from electrolyte imbalances. They can suffer from fatigue. They can suffer from even higher health risks due to low sodium. There have been studies done that low sodium is actually more detrimental for your health compared to high sodium. But where did this lie come from? There have been studies done that show, oh, well, the group that had higher sodium had higher risk of heart disease, had higher risk of blood pressure, had higher risk of all-cause mortality. But the problem was that those who were consuming high sodium were consuming fast food, were consuming ultra-processed foods. That's where the sodium was coming from. So usually a high sodium diet for those people done in the studies also correlated with a high calorie diet or a high processed food diet. And that was the problem, not the sodium. Especially if you're an athlete, especially if you're somebody who lives in a warm climate, especially if you're somebody who eats all whole natural foods or eats very low carbs, you need sodium. You need electrolytes, because it can literally be dangerous for your health. And I've told this story on the podcast multiple times, but it's really close to me because my mom has been hospitalized twice over the last 2 years because she was told to limit her sodium intake and was put on blood pressure medications, water pills, and told to limit her sodium intake. And she landed herself in the hospital because of extremely low sodium intake or extremely low sodium in her blood that caused electrolyte imbalances, that caused horrible nervous system function symptoms, such as tingling. She thought she was having a stroke. She had absolutely no energy. And people who are put in this situation, you can go into a coma. You can die. It's not a good situation to be in. So remember, sodium is vital for fluid balance, nervous system function, nerve transmission, muscular function. If you're active, especially if you sweat a lot, you need higher levels of sodium than the general population. You need more than you think. LMNT really created a movement in the supplement industry when they added 1,000 milligrams of sodium into a product, which has never been done before and most people would never do, but it was something that completely changed the industry for the good. So the biggest thing that I need you to remember here is that it's not the sodium, it's where are you getting the sodium? Are you getting it because you're eating a high diet loaded with processed foods, high in sugar and refined carbs? Or is it because you're adding salt to your fucking steak, right? So here, what you need to do, salt your food. Use a high quality salt. Like I love the pink Himalayan sea salt. There's a lot of people who use like Redmond's real salt, Celtic salt, all those things. They're great because they have additional minerals in them. But, if you're somebody who is working out a lot, also invest in a high quality electrolyte. LMNT is a great one. First Form makes a hydration product. BPN makes a great electrolyte product. There are a lot of great brands that make amazing products out there focused on helping you perform better, because if you are somebody who does focus on performance, which I know a lot of people who listen to my podcast do, if you're feeling a little bit lethargic during your workouts or even throughout the day, add some electrolytes into your water in the morning, during your workout, after your workout, wherever it fits, and notice a difference in your performance. I've had so many clients in the past who they feel a little off, they feel a little shaky, they don't know what's wrong. We add in electrolytes or we add more salt to their diet and they feel so much better. So the biggest thing that I want you guys to take away from this episode today is that you should not believe everything that you hear. Make sure you do your research. Make sure you find reputable sources. I want you to always ask questions when you hear something. Do your own research. And if you're ready to learn how to properly fuel your body for health and performance, you can always reach out to me for coaching. But the biggest thing that I want you to take away from here, again, do your own research, find reputable sources, don't believe everything that you hear on the internet, and go out and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.